Well, hey, there's a hot take that I've seen floating around on the Worship Bassist Facebook group, and it goes something like, compression kills your dynamics. It ruins your tone. If the sound guy's compressing, why do I need to compress? Just the idea that compression is optional, it's kind of a preference. And the truth is, bass players who are hating on compression really just don't understand how to use it. And that is completely understandable. There's a lot of mystery around compression. It's not easy to hear. You have to train your ear to hear it. And in fact, if you're setting compression where you can audibly hear it happening, there's a very high chance that you're doing it wrong. And that is one of the most common mistakes with compression, is setting it to where you can hear it. So in this video, I want to give you a couple concepts, a couple analogies that hopefully will demystify compression just a little bit more, because compression is not a preference. It's not a nice to have. It is a must for bass. So here's a very helpful way to think about the settings on a compressor. And this analogy is not mine, so I can't take credit for it, but it's very helpful and simplifies the settings on a compressor in a really good way. So imagine you are blasting music in your room and your mom busts in through the door and tells you to turn it down. So in that scenario, your mom would be the compressor. The threshold would be how loud the music has to get for her to react. The attack would be how fast she reacts. Does she come running right away? Does she wait a little bit? That's the attack. The ratio would be how much you turn it down. Do you turn it down a lot? Do you turn it down just a tad? And then the release is how long she basically stands at the door and waits and then kind of leaves. That is kind of the basic settings, and that would be across most, if not all, compressors that you come across. However, thinking of compression as just volume control is a huge mistake. When used properly, compression is tone glue. It glues everything together. It's punch, it's sustain, it's harmonics, it's loudness, it's density, gives weight to your bass. Those are all very, very important things for bass. Anytime you turn on the radio, I don't know who's listening to radio still, but anytime you listen to a recording of any kind on YouTube, on Spotify, there are layers and layers and layers of compression. There's compression happening during the recording process, during the mixing process, during the mastering process, and then the platforms themselves, what you're listening through. They oftentimes have their own algorithms that apply their own compression to make the song sound bigger, louder, to make sure it doesn't overload the speakers. So there's a lot of benefits and a lot of reasons to use compression, especially on bass. I alluded to this earlier, but one of the biggest mistakes bass players make is setting compression to where you can hear it. And there's a very, very high chance that if you can audibly hear compression happening, you're setting it wrong. When you crank the ratio, when you crank everything on a compressor, all of the comments that I shared earlier are going to be accurate, because it'll definitely make your bass sound like you're playing underwater. I'm going to say something that might not sound helpful, but it will make sense. Just stick with me. So compression is supposed to be more felt than heard. And I know that sounds ethereal, sounds weird, doesn't make sense, but let me share an analogy that I think will help you understand what I mean. So let's think of your bass tone like cooking or seasoning a steak. The bass is your steak. The EQ would be like your salt and pepper. This is where you're using some enhancement to bring out the natural flavor of the steak. I want you to think of compression as the cooking process. Do you reverse sear? Do you grill? Do you let it rest after you cook it? A lot of factors. But the cooking process is what brings all of those things together. Unless you're Gordon Ramsay, you're not going to taste the steak and be like, oh yeah, this was not brought up to room temp before it was cooked. It was straight out of the freezer. The reason he can do things like that is because he has his taste buds dialed in, right? And that's kind of what I want to encourage you. And if I bring it back to bass, if compression is like cooking, then you can think of presets as your recipe. They give you a good starting point. You can actually find really good recipes or presets out there for compression. But if you want to craft your own tone and own compression flavor, you got to experiment. You got to try different settings, learn what you like, kind of like trying a steak. If you don't know what a good steak tastes like, go to a good steak restaurant. So if you don't know what good bass tone sounds like, go to multitracks, go to YouTube, find some bass tones that you like, and you'll hear it. Compression is everywhere, and it's shaping tone, and you're hearing it, but not knowing what you're hearing. So before you roast compression, I want to encourage you to experiment and to dial it in and to use it, because it is a very important, essential tool for bass. If you have questions, drop them below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in another video.